So many people here this evening. Actually, I think you made the better choice. It is much warmer in here than it is in the main bar. So, but this is a very relaxed evening. So if you would like to get another drink during the course of the evening, we've moved the bar in here for convenience for you. So, I'm going to introduce our guest in just a moment, but before I do, let me introduce myself and a little bit about this evening. So for those of you whom I don't know, my name is Elaine Pickering, and one of the things that I do at the club is I'm involved in something called steering the course. So steering the course is something that was started by World Sailing, which is the governing body of sailing across the world. And it's an initiative to encourage more women on water, especially in the sport of sailing. And one of the things we do is run a women's sailing festival each year that is run and operated very ably by Hebe Haven Yacht Club. And that is going to be happening from the 18th to the 26th of May. One of the things that happens during that event is we have an inter-club races. And if anybody would like to be involved with that, whether you're a sailor or a non-sailor, please see me afterwards and I'll get you signed up for that. That's going to be on the 25th of May out at Shelter Cove and Hebe Haven. So we're running tonight specifically because we have got Ladies Helm on Sunday. Some of you I know are participating in that. But it's also International Women's Day next week. So this is very much a nod to women this evening. And I was saying to the guys before, I'm glad to see that they've marginalised themselves on this on the corner over there. And we've got women at the forefront tonight. So I would just actually, whilst we're on that subject, like to acknowledge two women here this evening. I'd like to acknowledge you all, but we only have time for two, as it is International Women's Day, and these are two women who've really contributed to our community, particularly in the sport of sailing. And one is our Commodore, Lucy Sutro, who I hope when she finishes her term as Commodore is going to write a book, because I definitely want to know about all the ghosts in the cupboard. And the other person is Kay Rawburn here. If you could wave, Kay. So Kay started a charity in 2009, I believe, called Sailability. Some of you may have heard of it, but it is working with people with special needs, disabilities, some of the marginalised community of people that we have, and encourages them and gets them to learn a skill of the skill of sailing, and it's a wonderful community. So lots of volunteers are needed for that. They do terrific programs, and if you'd like to get more involved in that, can you see Kay after tonight? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce a very special guest tonight, Amelia. So the steering the course that we do at the Yacht Club, we've got a series of talks called Spotlight On. And believe you and me, with those lights flashing on there, I definitely feel we're both under the spotlight tonight. And Spotlight is on Amelia tonight. So I am not going to tell her story because she is better at telling her story than I am. But Amelia is the sailing manager, the sailing director at Outward Bound, and welcome to our friends from Outward Bound and ABC, the Commodore from ABC here. So she's had a great experience in the UK in sailing and whatever. So Amelia, can we start at the very beginning, which apparently is a very good place to start? Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and growing up and how you got involved in the sport of sailing?
Yes, absolutely. So happy to be here this evening. I guess I started sailing when I was about 13 years old, which is a little bit older than some people start off in the sailing industry, especially at the yacht club. And the reason I started sailing was actually because of my school. I was really lucky that I had a very engaged kind of team at the school that I was studying at. And although I was really struggling at school, I severely lacked confidence and my attendance was incredibly low. Honestly, it wasn't the place for me at the time. They decided to send me away on a 7-day sailing course to the south of the UK in Portsmouth with a charity called the Tall Ships Youth Trust. And somehow that experience of sailing for 7 days was just absolutely transformational for me. And I couldn't see any other options after that experience than to become, I guess, what is a professional sailor. I didn't really know that term at the time, but that's the only thing I could dream of doing.
So, what made it a transformational experience? I mean, we've got parents here, we've got coaches here. What was there anything in particular that happened on that trip?
Oh, there were so many things. I think something that was really key for me, it was a big boat. It was a 20-meter X round the world racing yacht. And so the team on the boat was actually about 16 people. And I hadn't really been a team person up until this point. I was a bit of a loner, and the idea of living with 16 people on a boat for 7 days, 24 hours a day was quite scary. But I felt so accepted in that environment. You know, on a boat like that, everything's so heavy. It takes at least 5 people to lift up the head sail out of the sail locker. And so there wasn't really a lot of space for rejecting members of your team. You had to get along and you had to find your place on the boat. And that's just what I found, really. That was absolutely key for me.
So it was acceptance, teamwork. What about your coaches, your trainers?
The coaches were wonderful. They were incredibly step back, hands off. The goal was for us to become the people that sailed the boat. I remember at the end of the 7-day sailing journey, we actually did a race amongst the 4 identical boats that we had. And we did a round the cans race in a place called Brixham. And the skipper on the boat said to me on the last race out of 3, he said, "Amelia, why don't you come and drive?" And I was like, "Oh, it's a funny joke." He was like, "No, seriously, come and drive." And we were so close to all the other boats, you know, doing like 9, 10 knots on these 42-ton tanks. And I thought, this is absolutely ludicrous. But he just stood behind me the whole way. He never touched the wheel. I knew I had it under my control. And we crossed that finish line at the end of the race, and we actually won that race. And everyone turned around on the rail and kind of cheered. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've actually just done that. I'd never felt competitive in my life before that moment. But yeah, just handed it over, really. That's what was so key.
So you got the bug, but it sounds like you were given the responsibility and the support to carry out that responsibility. So when you got back to school, you're back to where you were before. What did you do to keep on with?
Well, I was really lucky, honestly, that I started sailing with this charity because I just kept going back and they were incredibly supportive. I think I spent about 13 weeks a year sailing. For those of you in education, I think that's slightly more than the amount of time off I was meant to take. But somehow it worked out. And I just kept going back as a volunteer. You know, I carried on going back. They supported me with bursary funding because I wasn't able to afford it myself. And they supported me to become a watch leader and a first mate. And eventually, they even helped me get funding from a UK corporation called Trinity House, who were able to support me to get my Yachtmaster qualification.
And this charity was the Tall Ships
Youth Trust, yeah.
Just tell us a wee bit about that.
I mean, their goal is exactly what they achieved with me, I think. They take young people from difficult backgrounds that maybe aren't thriving, don't have confidence, don't have the support around them, and give them the opportunity to go out on the water and learn something about themselves. And the goal isn't to create a pool of professional sailors. The goal is to create active, confident, stable citizens of the world that know that they can achieve something. And I guess professional sailing was a byproduct of that for me.
And do we have anything like that that's comparable in Hong Kong?
Yeah, we do. We've got a few organisations. You know, we've got Adventureship, we've got Outward Bound Hong Kong. They're all doing similar things. The yacht club's got the Sea Change programme. sail to change program. Exactly. And they're taking out, you know, young people on a different scale, on dinghies, and just giving them a chance to push their boundaries and do something new.
So you finished your A-levels, managed to get through your A-levels.
Yeah.
And what happened next?
Well, I walked out of my last A-level exam and I got on a train and I stepped onto my Yachtmaster exam. I think I got changed out of the school uniform, but that was about it. I really did step straight into that Yachtmaster exam.
So is Yachtmaster for a young person like you the same as it would be for an adult, or what?
Yeah, totally. It's professional qualification, so there's absolutely no difference. The minimum age that you can do your Yachtmaster offshore is 18. So I just scraped in there to do it as soon as like the week after I turned 18.
And tell us a little bit about what's involved in getting a Yachtmaster.
I mean, you've got to do a lot of kind of like qualification and training beforehand. You've got to log miles, you've got to have time skippering and experience skippering. And then you have what's essentially like a non-stop 48-hour exam where the examiner can ask you to do anything they can possibly think of and normally say that the engine's broken and someone's accidentally jumped off the boat at the same time. So they like to throw all the options out there, but it's a pretty intense exam, but it's like the gateway really to opening up that opportunity to work professionally.
So Yachtmasters to what next?
I guess I specialized in the offshore ocean sailing. I think for some reason that called to me. I loved the idea that you were cut off from all other support. You know, you do a transatlantic crossing, it takes 20 days, and you've got to be a doctor, an engineer, a navigator, an athlete. You've got to be everyone in your team. And if you're lucky, you've got a sat phone, so you can get some crackly advice down the phone that you'll probably run out of credit on before they actually tell you how to get the engine to turn back on. So that was just really called to me, that sense of freedom to be able to go anywhere in the world.
So we're going to have our China sea race coming up soon. Any advice for those? I think there's a few people in here who are doing the offshore. And we had actually a spotlight on offshore racing just in the fall. But what would be your advice for someone who is doing offshore?
Oh, just make the most of it, honestly. Just get out there and do it. I mean, the China sea race is, what, 4 to 5 days? That's not long enough offshore for me anymore. It's addictive. But especially for women, I would say that like big boat sailing offers an amazing opportunity to get mixed gender teams on the water. We often find that kind of small boat dinghy sailing, the genders are segregated, but we don't get that in the big boat environment. And especially when you've got crews that may be like kind of 8, 10, 12 people, you need so many different skills and personalities within that team. There's so much space for women to really shine with a specialism that you can just go for when you go offshore, you know?
And what about the fear factor? I'm going to do my first offshore soon, so I am a little bit nervous. Carl, you didn't hear that. Fear factor, how did you deal with that? You must have had a little bit of nervous. Lucy said, just go for it. Don't even think about it. Do your embroidery and don't think about it before you go.
Your embroidery?
No, not on board, before you go. Calm your nerves.
I'm not sure where it plays into any of it, but that's great. I don't know, fear factor, I was young and I felt I had a lot of kind of parental disapproval when I said I wanted to be an offshore sailor. My parents were dead set on the idea of me going to university and a more traditional academic route. And I had to kind of push against that to be able to go and do what I wanted to do. So by the time I actually did my first transatlantic crossing, I was so dead set that this was the only way I could do this. I had to achieve it. And it kind of overcame the fear factor. There wasn't a way I could fail at doing this. I had to make it work.
And now you've come this far, how do your parents feel about your career choice?
Oh, they absolutely love it. They they love the stories that come from it. They're so proud of me now. And it just shows, like, you know, the turnaround that can happen. They were concerned. We lived in the Forest of Dean. There were no sailing boats. They didn't even know professional sailor was a thing. So I guess they didn't have anything to measure it with. They didn't have any role models that they could see. You know, there was a strong phase, even kind of 4 or 5 years into my career, when my mum went out and picked up every female sailing autobiography she could find and read them non-stop for a year. And I because they were just coming out and she was just finding them, and you know, she hadn't been able to find that beforehand.
So speaking of role models, you came back from doing that and you joined. Yes, you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Maiden.
Yes, Maiden.
Yeah.
Tell us about that and what it is.
Yeah, Maiden, that was just an adventure from start to finish. Maiden was the first all-female sailing team to ever sail around the world. And in 2017, they found the boat Maiden, which was an aluminium, basically a piece of metal by that point. Calling it a boat might have been a stretch. And they rebuilt it.
In the Seychelles, it was.
It was abandoned, yeah, in the Seychelles, and they rebuilt it and are currently sailing around the world for, I think, the 3rd time, still with an all-female crew. So that was a whirlwind. I mean,
at what point did you join?
I joined in 2018. So I'd seen the boat be delivered from the Seychelles to Southampton, and I saw it come off the ship, and I took a picture of it on my phone while I was out working, and I basically sent an email to the info@Maiden Factor accounts and said, oh, I'd really like to help. I'm quite good at engineering, but I can clean stuff and paint stuff and do whatever. And Tracy replied, and
Tracy Edwards.
Well, I thought, no, this can't be Tracy Edwards. It's clearly someone else who works there that's also called Tracy that's handling the admin. It wasn't. It was Tracy Edwards. And she said, come down, meet with us, and we'll talk about giving you a job. I thought, what is she on about? I have nothing to add to this team. But Tracy's just one of those people that if you believe that you can do something, she believes you can do it as well.
Fantastic.
So I joined in 2018, and I went, and the boat was in the boatyard, and the yard weren't exactly as motivated to get it out the boatyard as we were. So they needed a little bit of organization. And I said, oh, I can do some project management stuff. And I've got a nice spreadsheet. And suddenly I had 35 guys working 4 shifts a day and all listening to a 20-year-old who was telling them how to organize their work.
I think there's a lot of women in here would like to know how you managed to do that, because they can't even get their husband to wash the dishes. But
I tell you what I learned was if I invite them all to a meeting, I would get about a 60% attendance. But when the World Cup happened and the sweepstake was being drawn, they were all there. So I just added a little meeting onto the end of that event.
So tell us a little bit about Tracy Edwards. What is it that inspired you about her as a renowned woman sailor?
I think just having a role model. You know, I think it's a growing thing in the sailing industry to have female role models, but we have worked at it. And charities like the Magenta Project are like actively trying to demonstrate to girls that there are loads of women that have done this before you, but you might never have heard of them. So the fact that I'd even heard of Tracy Edwards, it was like, wow, someone actually achieved something that I've always wanted to achieve. And it was like a dream working with her, because I had these role models like Tracy, like Wendy Tuck, like Dee Kafari, all these women that I'd read their books and seen what they'd done. And then they were like sitting next to me at events and in the boatyard and driving me to Screwfix because I didn't have a driving license.
So apart from what they achieved, what made them a role model for you? What characteristics do you think that they displayed that you appreciated?
I guess they never gave up. They just did it. They owned it at every point. And people like, you know, Dee Kafari, she sailed a Challenge 67, which is the boat that I first sailed on, the wrong way around the world single-handed. I mean, why would you do that?
So tell us what's the wrong way around the world.
So it's against all the prevailing winds and tides. It's like just a bad idea. But she was like, no, this is totally what I'm going to do here. I'm going to take this boat that was sailed by like 20 full-grown guys. I'm going to put an autopilot on it and one roller furler, and I'm just going to go off into the Southern Ocean.
So what possessed her to do that?
I guess no one had done it before, and she wanted to prove that it could be done, and it could be done by a woman.
Huh. So in terms of women and men, we're obviously talking a lot about women. I mean, as to sailing, are women as capable as men?
Yes, 100%.
Right answer.
Of course. Why not?
Why do you say that? What can a woman's role on board be that's different or the same as men?
So many different women. I mean, I can't say that I've sailed on like all male boats and all female boats, because just my presence is going to discount the first one. But I've definitely been the only woman on a boat a number of times. And I would say that mixed gender teams are always the best way to go. Honestly, we need, like, a boat is a society, right? It's a community. And if it's going to survive through everything, it needs the diversity that we have in real life on land. And women bring so much to boats. Women bring patience and organization and calm, and they can quell the shouting that happens. Women shout too, trust me, but generally they can quell the shouting, and the conversation gets a little bit better when we add more than one woman. I've had some terrible conversations offshore. And it's just brilliant. You know, I think roles...
You know what goes on offshore stays on offshore.
Does it? That's my little offshore team there. I think, you know, there are so many roles, and things where we've seen women really excel is roles like pit. You know, it's a multitasking role constantly, and it's got loads of organization, and you've got to be super in tune with the movements and the emotions of everyone else on the boat. If you're shouting at the person in pit to ease the halyard, it's 10 seconds too late. So you've got to be a person that's totally intuitive, and you see it happening before someone tells you it's happening. We also look at roles kind of like tactician, navigator. I've got so many female friends that have masters and PhDs in meteorology and still have to fight to get onto boats as tacticians and navigators, and they're fighting against guys that are really good at looking at clouds but maybe don't have that kind of academic background.
And looking at clouds or clowns?
Clouds.
Okay, so from the Maiden, what did you do next?
Oh, what did I do next? I did loads of stuff. I became a little bit interested in solo sailing. I think I was just looking for a chance to go out and take risks on a boat that didn't impact a lot of other people, like the crew. So going solo sailing is a great way to eliminate other people's feelings. So So I went to France. I did a lot of solo sailing. I sailed with Hare and helped her prepare for her Vendée Globe. And that was like a different thing entirely, you know?
So tell us about that. What's the Vendée Globe?
So Vendée Globe, single-handed, non-stop, round-the-world race. Takes kind of 3 to 4 months at the moment. And Hare's a female sailor who was going to do it single-handed. And it was really different. You know, I think we were talking earlier about the similarities between Hare and Tracy Edwards, and they're kind of so similar and so different at the same time. As personalities, like, they couldn't be more polar, but they both did something where they didn't take no for an answer. You know, Pip prepared her first Vendée Globe on a shoestring, and she'll be the first one to tell you that. I would turn up and I would go and do deliveries to the race with her, and she would deliver the boat, do the race, deliver the boat back again. When every other team had like teams of people, so the sailors fly in, do the race, fly home again, have a little holiday. But there wasn't the budget to do that. And that was really different to Maiden, where we had budget. And so I think that was a shock for me, but it also taught me that it wasn't about the money, it was about the person that was running it. And that's what Tracy Edwards and Pip Hare had in common.
So they obviously have a lot of tenacity. Any other kind of personality traits? You know, never say die when you're sailing is tough.
Yeah. Can we say stubborn?
Say what you like. Tenacious.
Stubborn, just wonderful, really. They knew that it was possible. And like I said earlier, if you told both Pip or Tracy that you knew you could do something, they believed you. I guess because they'd been telling people their whole life they could do something and not being believed. So they didn't want to be that person. They trusted the team around them, you know, and great teams kind of just gravitate towards people like that. Even if you don't have a budget, you still get people that want to have your corner.
So you've had a lot of great experience in the UK. So fast forward to Hong Kong. How did you get involved with Outward Bound?
Yeah, Outward Bound Hong Kong. Well, I actually sent an email about once every 12 months since I was 18 to come and work here. Because my dad had been a volunteer at Outward Bound Hong Kong in 1985, and I'd had this kind of narrative as a child growing up that there was this place called Hong Kong, and once my dad had been here and he saw all these amazing things happen, and he sailed to the Philippines and there were storms, and I thought, oh, I've got to go there. And like, yeah, so I emailed, and every year it was like, oh, I'm really sorry, but we've got a good skipper at the moment and we don't have any vacancies. And finally in 2020, the position opened up. So I came straight out.
So sounds like another stubborn lady.
Maybe.
So tell us a little bit about Outward Bound and what your role entails.
Yeah. So for me, I feel like it's full circle. It's the opportunity that I had when I was younger, but I get to provide it for others. It's a charity. We take young people from underprivileged backgrounds, those who may have drug and alcohol addiction, might have been in prison, might have mental health challenges, and we take them out to sea. And we just give them a chance to sail a 20-meter boat through Victoria Harbour and wherever they want to go. And as a coach, I step back as far as I can and I don't touch the wheel. And I just get to watch like that moment that I had when I was 13 happen over and over again. And it's so motivational.
That's fantastic. So are you able to share some of the stories that you've, some of the people who've had transformational experiences like you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like for everyone, it's so unique. I've got to say that, like the individuals we work with have such a variety of background that you can't generalize, but like it's from really small stuff. So I was sailing before Christmas and one of the guys on the boat was like, hey, Amelia, are we going to sail past the clock tower at Chim Sao Choi? And I was like, maybe. It depends on the weather. You know, every skipper, it always depends on the weather, okay? And he kind of kept nagging me about it. And then eventually we did sail through the harbour and I just remembered and I said, oh, look, there's the clock tower. He was like, oh, brilliant. Can I get a picture of me? And like, I want to get a picture in front of the clock tower. And I was like, right, okay, try to tack over towards the shore so we could actually make it out. And I said to him afterwards, I said, why are you so interested in the clock tower? And he said, oh, that's where I slept rough when I was homeless for 6 years. Yeah. And I can't imagine like that moment for him, charging through the harbour, having just achieved all this and being where he is in his rehabilitation journey, and then having like passing that location that means so much for him and having that picture. It must mean so much for him. And that's just like you could just gloss over that, you know. Are we going to sail past the clock tower? I don't know, you know. But it's so easy to pass over those moments for people. I had a guy who came on an 18-day course, and he had a lot of mental health challenges, and he was really up and down throughout the course. And I was like really worried he wasn't going to make it through. You know, 18 days on a boat non-stop is intense. And he was at points, he was like, oh, I think I need to leave, you know, and then we'd like kind of take a break and have a chat about it. And actually he was just finding it hard, you know, as you would. And at the end of the course, we did this wonderful kind of closing ceremony where his teachers could come along. And that's something I always wish I had, to show them what he'd achieved. And he came up to me, and he's a massive, tall guy covered in tattoos. He just burst into tears. And I said, oh my gosh, what's wrong? And he goes, I have never felt like this before. And I just don't know when I'm ever going to feel like this again. But I never want to stop feeling this happy. That's just, yeah.
So, I mean, on board, what happens on board? I mean, are people, allowed to drink, smoke, or whatever? I mean, because some people are coming with addictions. How does that get handled?
Yeah, so we're a sober boat. Smoking, we do let people manage it if they ever addicted to smoking, but obviously no drugs, no alcohol. But what we do is we just kind of build it up from day one, I guess, and we head out on a little day sail to begin with, and we teach everyone how to tack and jibe and points of sail, everything you need to know. And they become the engineers, and they do the engine check, and we all cook together and eat together, and maybe we go and land somewhere and have a barbecue on the beach, and by the end we can let go, really. And we quite regularly sail a route which we call the Hong Kong 360, goes from Double Haven up in the northeast all the way around south of Po Toi, around Soko Islands, around Lantau, under the Macau Bridge, past the airport, under the Chingy Bridge, and then back through the harbour. It's about 150 miles, and it normally takes us about 2 days. And we sail non-stop, and you know, people finish coming through the harbour and they're like, wow, like I never thought I'd be able to do that. And you know, it's like in the harbour, you're tacking up or jibing down the harbour basically non-stop. I mean, I don't think I've ever reached through there. So it's really intense right at the end of the trip. You know, you're doing like 20 or 30 tacks just to get through the harbour, and this team that didn't even know what tacking was or didn't even know what a winch handle was at the beginning of the week are there getting the sails in every time flawlessly, calling their tacks. I mean, sometimes I say, nah, go on, go a bit closer to land. And they're like, no, we're being very safety conscious, Amelia. We don't want to mess up now. I'm like, oh, okay. You know, but we don't want to get involved. We want them to be in charge. And it's just wonderful.
And do you keep track? I mean, do you have reunions with people and understand how they're developing?
Yeah,
that
we do follow up research, and we're really lucky that most of the groups we work with are actually from existing NGOs. So they're maybe in kind of like a 9 or 12-month program already, or like an ongoing program. So we really encourage the social workers as well to come along, because if they can see the transformation that these people have made, it gives them such a better chance of maintaining it when they get off the boat as well. And they don't just have to, I mean, I spent months trying to convince my teachers that I didn't need to wear the school polo shirt, because actually I'm really good at sailing now. But it didn't quite work. But I wish some of my staff at school could have seen the progress that I made on the boat. It would have made it so much easier to maintain.
So the Spirit of Outward Bound is the ship that you have, and you've just been to Japan.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, we've got some of the Japan crew in the room. So we sailed to Osaka last year, and we went there with an all-female team, because in, let me remember, 19 1973, there had been an all-female sailing trip with Outward Bound to Osaka, but all the staff were men. So we decided that now we had an all-female staff team available as well, we were going to do it all female. So we took kind of 10 people that mainly had never sailed before, gave them 7 days training in Hong Kong, and then we set off and sailed 15 days non-stop to Japan. Yeah.
So what's coming up next for you then?
So we're going to do it again, but to Qingdao this year. Yeah, it's about the same distance. And, you know, one leg's harder than the other, upwind on the way there, downwind on the way back. It's good. It gives us the opportunity to provide a varied level of challenge. So if someone isn't quite up to slogging upwind for 15 days, they can come on leg 2 instead.
Oh, you'll be starting your clip around the world with the Outward Bound before too long.
I don't want to be a competitor. It's fine. We do our own thing.
Okay, so as a young woman sailor, what would you say are the biggest obstacles that you perhaps face or some of your peers face?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, it's so varied for everyone. I remember when I first skippered a boat across the Atlantic, I was 20 years old, and I arrived in the Caribbean and went to the bar, as you do, and everyone at the bar, I could kind of hear them talking. I was eavesdropping. They were like, "Oh, did you hear that? Like, really young girl that sailed a TP-52 across the Atlantic?" And I was, "Oh, well, maybe I'll get up enough courage and introduce myself." So I did. I said, "Oh, I actually skippered that boat across the Atlantic." And they were like, "No, we were talking about the girl that skippered the TP-52. And I was like, yeah, that's my boat. That's the one I was just on for 20 days. No, there was a girl, she was the skipper. Do you know the skipper? And I was like, yeah, it's me. And I just felt like everyone loved the idea. But when I actually introduced myself, they really like didn't know what to do with it at all, you know? And sometimes as a woman in the sailing industry, I feel like I'm defined by my gender. You know, I feel like it's always, oh, we've got this great sailor on the boat and she's a woman. You know, why is that a shock? Why can't I just be a great sailor on the boat? I loved it when I came to, even when I came to Hong Kong, everyone would go around and introduce me and say, "Oh, this is Amelia and she's our new skipper and she's a woman." I think they could see that. Why can't it be, she's our new skipper and she's great and she's done this and she's really passionate, you know? Why does it have to be prefixed with my gender?
I don't know.
Rant over.
But do you think, I mean, as a woman sailor, you know, can we expect to be treated differently? I mean, are there things that we can't do on boats, can do on boats? I mean, or it should be absolutely gender neutral on a boat?
So I think it should be absolutely gender neutral on a boat. I think what I say to a lot of women is like, don't compare yourself to the man next to you, because it probably will be a man next to you. And our bodies are different, and let's accept that. And you might have to do that job differently than the guy that did it before you. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that you're going to have to find a way to adapt. I mean, I was working with Sam Davis in France, who's another solo around the world sailing badass woman. And she's about this big, really petite. And I think she's done like kind of 8 or 9 times around the world. Probably underselling it, honestly. And she, a long time ago, about 10 years ago, in her sail locker, she put these really like taut metal wires up on the deck head, and she would clip her sails onto them. So the sail would never drop onto the floor of the sail locker. It'd always be suspended. So she never had to pick up the dead weight of 200 kg. And she did this for a long time, and she got around the world a lot of times with this technique. And about 5 years ago, all the men caught on and were like, "Oh, hold on, why are we picking up these really heavy sails?" You know, I want that too, because it was a great idea. So you just got to find a way to do it that works for you, I guess.
So I guess this weekend we shouldn't be having ladies' helm. We should be having gender neutral helm.
We should just be having a great day out on the water, and women should be helming whenever they want to.
Exactly. So does anybody have anything that they would specifically like to ask Amelia? There must be some questions that people have. Lucy, let me just.
So what's the next adventure?
I guess the next adventure is Qingdao. Yeah.
After that,
Honestly, my adventures are becoming a little bit more paperwork based for a while, because we have our beautiful boat, Spirit of Outward Bound Hong Kong, who has served Outward Bound for over 20 years now. And you've probably seen her in the boatyard, a little bit rusty every year. So we're starting a new boat project, and we're going to design and build our own brand new boat for Outward Bound. So I guess that gives us the opportunity to help thousands more young people in Hong Kong.
Excellent.
Thank you. First of all, a very fantastic talk, but I have also been like one of the few women offshore sailors when I was very young, but I do find that it's changing rapidly. And it's nowadays not special, but it's also how you deal with it yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, just be equal and tell everybody you're equal, and then find your own way of solving problems.
Yeah.
That was one thing. The other thing is, how does Outward Bound get funded? You say there's a new boat coming.
Yeah. We're all kind of privately funded. We're not funded by the government, so it's all kind of private donations and philanthropy. We were very lucky when we sailed to Japan that nobody paid a penny for it, because the Golf and Country Club at Clearwater Bay funded the expedition. So yeah, it's always a challenge to look for fundraising, but most charities face that, I think.
Anyone else like to? Marina. Could you, the lady at the back? Oh, go on.
great.
Lucy.
We'll now have a second microphone to pass around. Who am I going to?
Marina.
Not much of a question, just observation. First of all, thank you very much for a very interesting talk. And I just would like to bring attention to the crowd. Great mix of men and women. And I think this is actually a sign of interest to a good sailor. And I would like to thank Yacht Club for organizing it. And it actually brings me joy to see that this is gender neutral and welcoming for all the sailors. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Actually, Marina, take a look at Marina. If you'd like to be involved in the women's, in the women's inter club race on the 25th of May, you can see Marina or me afterwards. We'll get you signed up. Anyone else? Renee.
Now you're doing all this Outward Bound and very good cause work. Where did your competitive edge go?
Oh, it won the Vietnam race.
Well done.
No, it hasn't died. It can't die. I think the truth is that kind of working with young people and giving the opportunity for sailing to become a more inclusive sport, it has my heart. And all that time I spent being competitive, I was always kind of missing the chance to really make sailing an inclusive sport. I felt that. But it hasn't died at all. I love racing still. And it's good to have that mix. You know, my staff will always laugh at me because I'll, finish work on a Friday and I'll be like, oh, what are you doing with your days off? I'm like, oh, I'm sailing both days. If it's in you, it's in you. Yeah.
Anyone else? Hi.
So you've really bigged up offshore sailing, but what are some of your low points and how did you get over them?
Oh, low points. Yeah.
Hard point.
I thought we were meant to be encouraging women into sailing. Yeah, plenty of low points, of course. I think one of the biggest challenges that I found that was kind of like a repeated low point for me was just like the weight of responsibility of being offshore, especially at a young age. You know, I was so lucky that I've never really had conflicts with crew on board that have kind of second guessed me as a skipper, but you have to deal with some pretty hairy situations, and trying to keep your cool in those times is possible because you've got 12 crews staring back at you, looking at you for advice. But afterwards, the decompression that you need to overcome some of those challenges takes a long time. I'll talk about one maybe. When I was sailing from the return transat, so we just stopped at the Azores and we were coming towards the UK, and we had a crew member, really young guy, just on a kind of like everyone signed up kind of clipper vibe. It was nothing special. And we got about 4 days out of the Azores and he just kind of collapsed on deck, 18-year-old guy. And we were like, wow, what's happening here? Pretty concerning. He was in and out of consciousness. So we called in for the medevac. And the Spanish Coast Guard answered because we were closest to them at the time. And they said, well, you can sail within 200 miles of the shore and we'll come and do a ship transfer and rescue him. I thought, brilliant. So you're kind of sailing for half a day. We get there and there's a 6 to 8 meter sea state, which is about half the mast. And they radioed us up and they were like, great, now what you do, you get the guy and an able-bodied crew member and you put them into the life raft and you let the life raft free from your boat and we'll come and scoop up the casualty from your life raft and then you go back and retrieve your first mate, something like that. And I thought, this 12-man life raft, if anyone's done sea survival with Cameron, will probably flip over as soon as I put it in the water with only 2 people in it. And it was a super difficult decision to make because our next opportunity for rescue was like 150 miles further of sailing and to get a helicopter rescue. And so I was faced with, like, you know, potentially the medical situation deteriorating rapidly or risking 2 people in the hopes of a successful rescue. So I decided to carry on and sail the 150 miles further. And he was successfully picked up by helicopter and we followed him in to port. And I kind of arrived at the hospital and the guy was in the hospital bed. He was fine by this point, absolutely fine. Turns out it's nothing to worry about, but his dad was there. His mum and dad had flown out and they said, so are you in charge? Are you the skipper of the boat? And I kind of took a gulp and I was like, I don't know. Should I be today? Is there anyone else? I was like, yeah. And he just put his hand out. And his dad worked in the Coast Guard in the UK and he followed the whole thing, the whole track of the rescue. And he put his hand out and he shook my hand. He said, thank you so much for keeping my son safe. I couldn't have made a better decision myself.
Questions? Anybody else?
Thanks. I mean, you're dealing a lot with youth, and some of the biggest issues for youth these days are mental health issues, social media, use of iPhone, just continually. And I imagine that being on a yacht for a long time is really, really helpful to that situation. Yeah. Should we be doing more of this?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I mean, I often work with young people that say that they really feel like they've had the opportunity to be most themselves when they're away from their phone. I had a girl on the last course who said, my dad bet me $500 that I wouldn't be able to stay away from my phone for 9 days. And I'm going to go back and tell him that I did it. And I've never made so many friends in my life. So that was a really special moment. I think, you know, it's with the right support, it's in the right context. Technology is so beneficial in so many ways, and it's just finding the balance that we need to do more of.
Hi, Amelia. I read in the descriptions that you entered to be a marine engineer. So did you go back to school, or did you learn on the job? And how was it contrast with your disenchanted early schoolwork? And also, for someone passionate about sailing, do you have any career advice? Like what young sailors, what would be suited for a passionate sailor
Yeah.
in their career? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Let me address your first question first. So, yeah, I did. I think Maiden was the biggest boost to my ego as a marine engineer. I think I was kind of interested in this concept of engineering, and I thought that's a really good way to get on a boat and never be kicked off if you can always fix it.
It's a bit like being, if you can cook on an offshore race.
Yeah. But there's not a lot of women doing the engineering, so it was also a little bit of a niche. So I was pretty passionate about doing that, but you know, working with Tracy, she just gave me the opportunity to do it, really. And to answer, I did kind of go back to school. I studied a certificate in naval architecture, but just evening classes. Yeah. So I guess I did hit the books, but I was motivated to do it, and I saw what I needed to do and why I needed to do it, and that for me was the type of education that I needed, and I felt that I was missing at school. I didn't see the purpose. So as soon as I had a purpose, no problem at all. And then to answer your second question, how to get into kind of the professional sailing industry if you're a young person, I think Hong Kong needs to do more of this, honestly. The leisure marine industry in Hong Kong is like just expanding rapidly, but there's not much of a route into it. And especially if you don't have the finance to cover that yourself. And I think that's something that clubs and NGOs could be doing more of. There's a few ways to do it. I would just say, like, believe that it's possible. Just because you haven't seen someone do it before you doesn't mean you can't walk down the dock or go to the bar or put your name on the crew list and get out on a boat. Every sailing industry is a very small one. So if you can just get in with one person and someone can believe in you, then you'll probably make it. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, I've heard you say repeatedly that just find your little niche on a boat, you know, and that's your place and you can develop from there. Just, yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say on the women's front as well, there's some amazing initiatives out there, such as like the Magenta Project, which is a really awesome all-female sailing or a charity that runs like a year-round mentoring program for women at all levels of the sport. They mentor Olympians, they mentor people that want to get their day skipper, and you can be mentored by someone with a medal, by someone who's sailed around the world solo. So if you do have any like parents or women in the room that want to get into sailing, I would say look up the Magenta Project for sure. Yeah.
I think we've got time for one more question. I think there was a
Who am I going to give this
oh,
to?
so the gentleman just had a
Bad luck.
Just a question. So when you get a new crew on board,
Yeah.
how do you get the crew to mold together and to find their niche?
Yeah, what an interesting question. That can go so easily or so wrong at the same time. I think it's about kind of, I'm a big believer in briefings and debriefings. I'm a big believer in like an open environment on board where people feel they can share what's working and what's not working for them. And I think that is really important. You know, there are some boats that go out there and people shout and belittle others, and that's never going to work. You know, you've got to cut the volume and start really talking about what's working in your team. And, you know, being offshore, being out there on the water, winning, losing together, that's going to bring the team together ultimately. So the more time you can spend on the water is definitely the key.
I think also explaining what everybody's role is. Sometimes you get on a boat and people just expect you to know what you're supposed to be doing, and it's always worthwhile pointing out.
Definitely. And doing training, I'm amazed by some of the boats in Hong Kong that just go out for races Like, training is so important. How is anyone knowing what they're doing if they're not training? I'm confused by it. So yeah, just go out training, even if you can only fit in half a day, or you say 2 hours and we're going to drill these 2 things only. You know, doesn't have to take up the whole weekend for you to get out on the water and practice a maneuver together.
Yeah. So it's probably about 6 months ago, I was told you must meet Amelia. And I said, sure, I'd love to meet Amelia. So we met for a coffee, and then it turned into lunch, and then it turned into another coffee. And we could go on all evening. Unfortunately, we don't have the afternoon like I had with you. But you know, steering the course, what it's about is it's bringing together communities of women sailors and people who are interested in this, women who are interested in the sport of sailing. And it's about celebrating those who are accomplished in the sport, which I think we've done tonight, Amelia. It's been amazing to understand some of what you've been able to achieve. But it's also to encourage those who are new to the sport or who are developing in the sport. And I know for myself, I've been greatly encouraged by hearing your stories tonight and learning from you. So I hope you've all felt encouraged tonight. It's been a great evening, and we would like to thank you very, very, very much, and hope it's not the last time you'll come back and visit with us and share some more of your experience with us. Can you all thank, please, Amelia?
I'm also just going to say, I'm going to butt in. This is not my evening, but well done for organising this, Elaine. An amazing evening. And you are absolutely inspirational.